Hello everyone, I am Savannah Kepley. I'm a middle school language arts teacher like maybe you are, and I am here to help you plan your day, help you plan your weeks, help you plan your lessons. I'm like your little planner assistant type thing, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing in my week 3 of school. So if you missed it, I did week 1 where we did getting to know you activities, building great classroom culture. I did week 2 where we talked about grammar, expectations, and I started them with our RTQT, which is how we do constructed response format, which is something that we will do throughout the whole school year. So it was super important. Week 2 was really important. So now we're into week 3. This video is all about introducing inference and text evidence. That is the first standard that I teach, because it's a standard that they will use throughout the whole year. We are always inferring, we're always using text evidence. So that is a power standard, and that's what I really want to just jump into right off the bat. So this is week 3. Follow along. I hope you enjoy it. Use my activities, or you can plug in your own and just follow my format. It's up to you what works for your classroom, but here's what I'm doing in my classroom. Let's get started on week 3. And again, this week it's all about inference and text evidence. And our goal this week is students will be able to analyze text in order to make inferences that can be supported with text evidence. Super easy, super basic, but we're starting to dive into our standards with this week. We're going to start out, as always, with the bell ringer. We're going to continue with the question of the day, bell ringer, because we're in that flow and we want to solidify our routines throughout this week. So we're going to continue with our bell ringer for this week. After our bell ringer, we're going to move on to something new. We're going to add in our word study. And our word study for me is I combine morphology and vocabulary together. So let me show you what that looks like here. So I want to show you how I teach vocabulary. These are Google Slides. Google Slides are just the best thing ever invented. So each one is a different slide. And of course I put the word and the definition, but what I really think helps connect everything is I find a GIF. I'm like, is that how you say it? Yes. I find a GIF, and then I write a little fun sentence to kind of go with it so they can see how the word is used, and then the GIF really helps like bring it home and make memories and connections in their brain. And I always try to use like fun sentences that they will connect to and they find a little bit just exciting. You know, like there was palpable tension in the air at my birthday party when my sister brought my ex-boyfriend as her date. They're like, oh, look at that, that's some tea right there, you know. So they really like this kind of stuff, and it helps connect what we are doing. It helps connect the words together, and it builds memory. After word study today, what we are going to do is we are going to take an inference and text evidence pre-assessment. And this pre-assessment is not just to take a pre-assessment and not do anything with the data. This pre-assessment is going to be used to make differentiated groups a little bit later, like starting on Friday and then working into next week and the week after. So they really need to take this pre-assessment seriously so we can really see what level they're on. So that's going to be what they do today. So we have bell ringer, we go into vocabulary where we're just going over the words with the students. Then they're going to take the pre-assessment. After the pre-assessment, students can read independently or work on their vocabulary words. And for homework, they're going to take notes in their notebook for the morphology and word up vocabulary words. They'll use these notes tomorrow in class for their activity sets. And for the students with special needs, I would consider printing the slides and having them highlight the important information. And then we just glue them into their notebook so they have them. So that is today. It's a not very exciting day. I always tell my students not every day is going to be exciting. Not every day can be wedding cake. If you know that song, drop it in the comment below. But not every day could be wedding cake. And so we have to sometimes do some things that aren't as engaging and exciting. And that's what today is, because we're doing that pre-assessment. So now we're on Tuesday and we are doing the same thing. So we're getting those routines down so we have a calm and structured environment. So they start out with question of the day. And then today, instead of doing the vocabulary words, you're going to have them open their notebook and they're going to use their notes to work on their vocabulary activity sets. And I usually do that for about 10 minutes. And so after that, we start our Inference mini lesson. And we do this mini lesson as a class because I want everybody to be on the same page with Inference as far as vocabulary. And so I know a lot of teachers teach that Inference is an educated guess. And it is. I mean, that's not wrong, but I want to get my students away from using that terminology and vocabulary because I don't want them guessing at anything. I want them to figure out things based on the clues in the text. So we're not guessing, we're figuring it out, which is, they're like, isn't that the same thing? I'm like, yeah, it probably is. But I think it just sounds better to say figure out instead of guess because we're not guessing. You're going to know it based on the clues in the text. So that is what I really want us to really focus on that. And they do a mini lesson activity with it. And I have them work with a partner or you can have your students work independently. Let me show you what the mini lesson activity looks like. Now that we have our inference down, I do want them to practice it a little bit so we can make sure that they understand. And so I have a couple of practice activities. First one's where they're trying to infer based on past experiences about what the cat's thoughts and the mouse's thoughts? Mouses? Yes, the mouse's thoughts. That sounds funny. And then we take it a little bit step further and infer based on a text message. And then finally, they read these Amazon reviews and they, based on the text, they infer what the reader thinks or the person thinks about the product. And then they review it or give it a rating. Then after that, I have an inference exit ticket that they do so I can see where students are as far as inferring. So that is Tuesday. Now we're going to roll into Wednesday. And again, we are establishing those routines and procedures. So they have question of the day. And then, like I said, we're rolling into vocabulary. So these two activities should roll right into each other with a smooth, seamless transition because everything is out and open and ready. After that, we are going to do some activity stations. And so you can pick stations that are appropriate levels for your students. Let me show you what I have available in ELA Unlimited. The first activity I have for my students, and it's more of a basic activity, and these are for students who, if you have a class that kind of struggles with inferring, you start them off with this type of activity. And basically, they just look at the images, and based on the image they see, infer because I wonder. So it's a great little graphic organizer to use based on the images. And you can put them in groups, and then they can, there's how many do I have? I have 5 of them here. So you can have one at each station and then the groups go around and talk about the images and fill out the graphic organizers based on that. So they're inferring things based on the image. So that's station number 1 or option number 1 for stations. Option number 3 is inferring character traits based on tiny short stories. They're like paragraphs, really. So they have to read the short story and then they can infer what Caitlin is, because of whatever based in the text. And then they infer what Caitlin would say to her parents based on what happened in the text. So again, I have 5 of these, and then you can put 1 at each station and students in groups, and then they go to each station and read and answer the questions. Now you could also combine them, right? You could put the images at some stations and then this one at another, however you want to do it. 5 and 6 are more application activities. And so they have to think about someone they live with. How would you describe them? And think about their personality. Think about a time their personality was on full display. So they have to write like a short paragraph that describes the person without coming out and saying it. So that is another option. Let me show you a third option. This third option is called Where Am I? And so students have to read a short little paragraph and they have to infer the setting and they have to tell me why they think that is the setting. This could actually be interchangeable with the second station option. I actually feel like this one's a little bit easier, so this one might be a good option for those students who are struggling with inferencing, or if you have a classroom that's struggling with making inferences, this would be a good second option. And then I would actually put the character traits one after this, because that's a little bit more in depth. So again, this one has 5 options here. And finally, my favorite one. Now, this is a crowd pleaser. They like it. The Amazon reviews, and they did this with the activities in the Inference mini lesson. So they read the Amazon product reviews. They have to determine if it's a positive or negative review, and then they have to highlight the sentences that help them determine that. They love it. It's fun. So this is a more higher level one. If you have students who understand inferencing, I would go with this station activity. And again, there's 5 of them as well. Or you can just mix them all up, and you can have some pictures, you can have some setting inferences, character inferencing, and this one as well with the Amazon review. Your choice, but they're all there. After your stations, we're going to start teaching our students about being active readers. I think it's super important to be an active reader. I'm going to talk to you about it here. So one of my favorite things to do is to teach students how to be an active reader, because they don't know or they haven't practiced how to read actively. So research shows when you read with a pencil and a purpose, you are more likely to read and understand what you're reading. And isn't that our goal as middle school language arts teachers, is to have them understand what they're reading? Yes. So I teach them active reading skills. Funny story really quick before I move on. We did our end of grade test, and I constantly preach about reading with a pencil, reading like active reading. And so at our end of grade test, one of my students held on, he didn't test with me, he tested with another teacher, but he held his pencil like this while he took his test. He didn't do anything with it, which whatever, but he held it, and he did better than he did last time. So maybe it does work. Back to my active reading skills that I teach. I don't just teach read with a pencil. I do have some specific strategies that I go over with my students, and we do this all year long. Anytime we're reading, we're jotting or annotating if you want to be fancy. But we read together, we stop together, we jot together. We're always jotting. We're always noticing those inner thoughts and analyzing them and putting them down on paper. So let me show you. Now these are it. I'm just going to pop through them really quickly. We have doodles, we have questions, we have hashtags, which they love. We have reactions, big idea, motivation, conflict, quote, and that's any significant quote or meaningful quote. So we read and we jot. We read and we jot, and we become those active readers. So after we read, I might be like, what was the motivation there? Why did a character do whatever they did? And we talk about it, and then we write it down. Or I say, what was the conflict? What's happening here? What's the conflict between the characters? And then we write it down. Or I say, what led to that conflict? And then we do a cause and effect type jot. So these jots are a way for us to discuss what we read, and then to actively write it down, so we have it down on paper, and we're doing like an active process with reading. Now, I model this, and we do it together first, and then as we go through the year, they'll do it with a partner or in groups, and then we start doing it independently. So we become active readers, always active readers in our ELA class. We're going to start with doodles and questions. Those are the easiest, I think. And students will use that tomorrow for their short story. So we're always reading with a purpose. Like, we're always doing something with our reading in class. Now, when I read at home for fun, I don't read with a pencil in my hand with a purpose. But reading at home for fun and reading at home in language arts, where we're learning to apply things, are 2 different things. So that's why we are always being active readers. And then we're going to end again with an exit ticket. If you love routine and consistency, then your heart is singing right now, right? It's so much fun to have structure. And then Thursday, oh, I love it. It's going to be a great day, because what we're going to do is we're going to start out with question of the day. And then after question of the day, of course, we're rolling right into our vocabulary words in our activity sets. We're going to review those procedures that we talked about last week about how to read as a class. As a reminder, here they are. And then we're going to start something with the target objective slide. Now, our target objective slides are how we get students to focus on what we're reading. So we're reading with a purpose. Science says when you read with a purpose, you're more likely to remember what you read. So I always establish a purpose before we read, and I use these target objective slides to do that. So let me show it to you right here. And then I also use this target objective slide before we read, and so students know exactly what we are doing and why we are doing it. And I always review this with them as well before we read. Now that we have a purpose down, we are going to read What's the Worst That Could Happen by Bruce Cavell. And now, I think I said that right. I always struggle pronouncing my vowels because I learned how to read like whole reading instead of sounding things out. I didn't actually learn that till college. Anyway, so I always struggle with vowels. So if you hear me say or mispronounce something, then you know why. Now you know why. So don't come at me, okay? I'm sorry. I do the best I can. Now, in today's reading is going to be a little bit different than what we did last week because I am going to give students who want to read a role, and I'm going to talk about that here. I'll share with you one of my favorite read aloud strategies. So I read aloud a lot in the classroom because I feel like my students need to hear me read. They need to hear the fluency. They need to hear us stop and model and talk about what we're reading. So we do that a lot. Now, it will get annoying if it's just me reading all the time. So I want to bring students in as well. And let me show you my favorite strategy to do that. So what I do is I assign students character roles, or I ask students who would like to read out loud. They raise their hand. By the end of the year, everybody's raising their hand. Everybody wants a character role. So, and then I take those students and I assign them a role to read, the dialogue to read. So let me show you with a book. We're going to do Schooled if you've never read it. It's a great, easy read, especially if you have lower level students. They love this book. It's very accessible. Gordon Corman writes great realistic fiction. So let me show you how I do it. So I go through the chapter and I see who has a speaking part or dialogue. So this is Officer and this is Cap, our main character. And then I just make a list of who has the speaking parts. That's Cap as well. And then this is Rain, the grandmother. And I just make a list and then I assign students to those roles. So what students will do is I will read the narration, and then they will just read the dialogue if they have that role. Now, to make this work, I always tell the students to read in their best, loud, I love language arts voice, to project their voice. Also, I tell them that if they come to a word that they don't know, that's okay. We'll work through it together. I will tell them the word. No one else is allowed to say the word out loud for them. It's me. And then what I have found is students don't understand dialogue. They don't understand when characters are switching back and forth. So this is another good reason why we should read aloud and have our students take on roles if they want to. Because again, they don't know. And so if they're reading a story independently and they don't understand that this character has stopped speaking and another one has started, they don't understand that independently, they're not going to understand the story. So we have to model it for them, and this is a great way to do it. So now that we have roles picked out, we are going to read this together. I model when we read this about my inner thinking and how to apply these active reading strategies. So what I do is we read together, we stop together, we jot together. And jot is just the way I say annotation. So I'll use those two words. I'll just flip them out. They're synonyms, right? So we read together, we stop together, we jot together. So I'll read it and stop at certain places and be like, oh my goodness, what is happening here? Like, can we see this in our head? Like, what can you see in your head? And then I take ideas from the class and then I do a quick little sketch in my jot boxes on the board, and they do it in their notebook as well. I have some more activities related to how to annotate in your notebook, and I'll link that blog post below if you're looking for ideas for that. So like I said, we're reading, we're jotting, we're annotating, we're being active readers. It's a great time. And now it's time for application. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them 1 to 2 questions, depending on my level of class, about what would what's the worst that could happen? And these are these are RTQT inference questions. So we're applying our inference skills that we learned this week, and we're applying that with the RTQT that we learned last week. So you might want to do one together as a class, and then they can do the other two, or do the other one with a partner, and you can walk around and help them. These take a while, especially when you're first starting out. So we don't do 1,000 RTQTs. We do one. We do one quality one, maybe two if you have a really good class. So we really are focusing on those constructed response formats and bringing in inference with it. Yay, it's so much fun. All right, now we need to remind our students, if you have time, an inference exit ticket. We need to remind our students that they need to complete the RTQT question if they didn't, and they have a vocabulary quiz tomorrow. So that's going to be their homework. And then Friday is going to be question of the day, and then we are going to explain our standards RX expectations. So standards RX is all about differentiating the standards for our students so we can meet them where they are. I have a video that I made about standards RX that I'm going to link below because it's a little bit long and not everybody wants to differentiate for their classrooms. So if that is something that you want to do, I suggest that you watch the video, and I'll link that below. So after you explain the expectations for Standards RX, if you are doing that, you're going to have students do their vocabulary quiz. And then afterwards, they are going to work on their Standards RX individual assignments. Now, if you are not doing Standards RX, that is cool too. What I would have students do is do an inference activity where they post, and I have a ton of those on my website as well. That is it. That is week 3. I hope you enjoyed following along with me. If you're like, this is great, I want some of these things in my classroom as well. I want to do the activities that you're doing, Savannah. I hear you, and I have it for you in ELA Unlimited. So ELA Unlimited is just a website that you can go to where you can download all the materials and resources for one low price and then use them in your classroom. You just follow along with what I'm doing, plug and play, you're ready to go. If you're interested in that, that's linked below. I also have a couple of things on Teachers Pay Teachers. It's not all the stuff that's on this video, but it's a couple of them, and I have those linked below as well. And that is it. If you have any questions, let me know. Until next time, I hope you have fun teaching. Bye.